Hi, thanks so much for tuning into TV2. Today you're on the front porch with us at Copeland Community Center, and my guest today is Audrey Bezanson. Audrey, thank you so much for agreeing to join us.
Thank you for having me.
And the birds and the crickets and everything are here to serenade us. And I think there's even a rooster across the river crowing. So it must be morning.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Audrey, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Waltham, Massachusetts, long time ago. And I grew up mainly in New Hampshire. Most of my years were spent there. I don't have a lot of memories from my childhood, but I had a good time growing up. Like most kids, I guess. I tried to be happy and content and do what I was told.
We were talking ahead of this conversation, and you talked about living near a place that a lot of people know here at the village.
That's Alton Bay Christian Conference Center.
And yes, that was a big part of your early life, wasn't it?
My husband was from there. He was from Massachusetts, but he knew every summer of his life he was at Alton Bay, New Hampshire. I think at least half of the church, the Somerville Mass Advent Christian Church, went to Alton Bay in the summer and spent their summers up there. But we met there at a roller skating rink. That was the main place for entertainment at the time.
And that was actually in the town, right? Not at the
in the town of Alton Bay. Well, actually, right on the water. And we had a good time there. That was where I spent most of my summer, roller skating, or during the day going there and swimming. But
do you still think about skating? Would you like to go skating today?
I'd like to see if I could stand up on them still. I don't know. I think it would be a dangerous thing.
Well, roller skates are probably different, very different now.
Yes, well, not the ones they use in skating rinks, I don't think.
Oh, really? Okay, because I'm not a skater. I haven't.
Oh, no, this was an indoor skating rink, and it was 4 wheels. Some of them were still using the clip-on roller skates, but I bought myself I worked part-time as a waitress in a little diner there. It was right next to the roller skating rink. And I had nothing else to do. Didn't have a lot of friends. Went to school there, high school, the years spent there at Alton, the town of Alton, but I spent my summers up at the Bay most of the time. And I never even knew Alton Bay Christian Conference Center was there. Most of my friends never spoke about it. They didn't attend there. And so I knew nothing about the place. But my husband knew it because he lived there in the summer, every summer. He worked in the kitchen where they were serving their meals during the summers. And his mother also worked there. She was a widow from early age. When my husband was only 9 years old, his father died of cancer. Mm-hmm. And so he knew the place very well, but he never talked about it, never took me up there. But he drove the garbage truck, so to speak, from the campground, the pickup, little old pickup truck with springs coming up out of the seats. And he used to make trips to the dump, and he would stop by where I was working down there and pick me up on my break and take me to the dump with him. That was fancy dating.
It
back
was
then.
fancy dating. But it led to a long-time relationship,
Yes,
didn't
it certainly did. That was the best move I ever made in my life, I think, was marrying him.
Where did you get married?
We got married in Biloxi, Mississippi, because he had already joined the Air Force. And he was still going to school. He quit high school in his middle of the year, I think, and joined the Air Force. So he was down there, but he came home for Christmas break, and he says, I don't like being this far away from you. He says, I think we ought to get married. So we did, but we got married down there. He was supposed to have made everything, got all the arrangements made, talked with the base chaplain and so forth to arrange for our marriage. And I flew down. He had nothing. But we went to a justice of the peace and got married, and it lasted just as long as
Probably
as
much
a
longer
big
than
wedding.
many marriages. Yes. How many years were you married?
54. Yeah, long time.
Congratulations.
Right. Raised 4 children.
And were you one of 4 children, did you say, as well?
I was, yes. But I didn't know my parents growing up. I lived with an aunt and uncle, grew up with them. And they were good to me, and I had a good life. And I needed nothing except more friends.
Mm-hmm.
I was a lonely child, I think. But that's one thing I like about being here. You don't get lonely. This village is the most wonderful place. People are so friendly, and you feel safe here. I just feel so safe here.
And I just enjoy the surroundings, too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful grounds. Yes.
Well, tell us about after you and your husband got married, where did you live first?
First, well, we lived in a lot of places, he being in the service for 20 years, so the first 20 years were everywhere. We went first to St. Albans, Vermont when he finished his schooling. Went to St. Albans, Vermont, and that's where my first child was born, my first son. And then we moved to Saratoga Springs.
Oh, New York, right?
Saratoga Springs, New York. He worked on maintenance of radar sites, so we were always at small bases. So we lived off base most time because I didn't have enough housing for the married families to live on base. Mm-hmm. So we most always lived off a base. And but St. Albans was very nice. We had a lot of benefits from being there because they took the military in most of the entertainment that was going on. You could go if you wore your uniform free of charge. Uh-huh. So we did get a lot of nice entertainment while we lived there. And then that's where my daughter was born, Cynthia Harper, and I'm sure a lot of people here at the village know John and Cindy. But,
and where was that, in St. Albans?
In St. Albans, no, this was in New York.
Oh, Saratoga Springs.
Saratoga Springs, yes, she was born there. And then we moved then he was sent to Alaska. No, he went to Alaska before we went to New York. That's where we went when he came back from his year in Alaska. I went back home for that year with my son. And so he didn't get to know his daddy very well. He was only 6 months old when Buzz left for Alaska. And when he came back, he was 1.5 years and just had to get acquainted with him. But then we went to New York. And Cindy was born there. And then our next trip went to Nova Scotia. And our second son was born there. So he had to either decide when he was 21 whether he wanted to be an American or a Canadian. He chose American. Thank you, Philip.
And where was your fourth child born?
Fourth one was born in Indiana. So that was the last of it.
But each of them were born in a different, either state or country, right?
We were in Rockville for about 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that was a good long time, get acquainted. After that, we went to northern Maine, up in Aroostook County, potato growing farms. We spent several years there. This was after he was in Thailand for a year. We lived back in Rochester, New Hampshire, for that year. And my kids my oldest son was about 13, just starting high school. So it was a difficult year for him. And for me, with 4 children to raise on my own, it was a hard year, a very hard year. And it was about halfway through that year that my 2 children, the oldest being 13, the two older ones wanted to be baptized. We'd been going to church and they loved it and they loved the Lord. And so the pastor came, Pastor Ron Walton, a lot of people here know him as well, came to visit me to ask me if I thought they were ready for baptism. And he asked me where I was baptized and when. And I said, I never have been. I was not brought up in the church. And so we talked for a while, and eventually I got down on my knees by my couch and I gave my heart to the Lord. And that made a big change. It had been a very difficult year. It was still difficult being alone with 4 children. But I had an easy feeling inside that just made it so much easier to handle.
You had help then?
I had the Lord then, right. And it made a big difference. And it's strange, at the time my husband was not, when he went to Thailand, it had been a long time since he'd been active in the church. We went to church, but he had given his heart to the Lord when he was a teenager, and but he hadn't been living right for several years. And we were separated so the Lord could get in. And he rededicated almost the same time that I gave my heart to the Lord. He was in Thailand and gave his heart back to the Lord, made a recommitment, and our letters crossed in the mail. And
my goodness.
I mean, it was the Lord working. It was just no other answer for that. But when he came home, the 2 older children and myself were baptized, so he could be there then with us. And that was a good time. Then after that, he retired from the Air Force after Northern Maine, and he was only 39 years old, but he'd given 20 years to the service. And when our youngest son finished high school and didn't want to go to college, wasn't really a college type, but we said, well, we're going to move to Florida. We've had enough of New Hampshire winters.
I bet.
We had lived in New Hampshire for over 10 years, a little over 10 years. And after he retired from the military. And we decided it was time for us to go. The children were all grown enough to take care of themselves, and 2 of them were married. And so we just decided we wanted to move to Florida. And John and Cindy at that time he was just starting his time with the Lord as a pastor, and he'd gone to Berkshire College, John had, and they ended up down here at the village. And so we first learned about the village. Well, we'd heard about it all our lives, really. That it was knew that it was here, and that it was a retirement village. And so we thought about that. But we lived down in Largo area, Clearwater area, when we first moved to Florida. And because John and Cindy ended up here, we decided maybe that would be a good place to go up and check out, So we came up and visited them up here, and we thought this was the most beautiful place to live. It just hit us when we came through the gates that this was such a nice place. So we went back down to Largo, lived there a few more years, and finally, because I was having some problems at the time, we decided, or my husband decided, we'd better move up here where we could get some help if we needed it.
Let's stop for a minute and tell our viewers a little bit about your daughter and son-in-law.
Okay.
John was the pastor here?
Yes. The one that goes out and does all the visitation and hospital visits and such. And he was very good at it. People
and they
really
were here a
enjoyed
very long
him.
time.
They were here for over 20 years, 22 something, I think, years they worked here. They liked it, and they were very busy, though. John, it was a very tiresome job for John. He was constantly on the road, going to the hospitals and going to the visit them at homes, and kind of wore him out after 22 years. So he had an opportunity to take a church up in North Carolina. So they went up and checked it out and liked it. And so they left the village and went up there for 5 years. They said, we'll give you 5 years. We don't know any more than that at the time. So after the 5 years, they were ready to move. John was ready to retire.
So he's now among the retired.
He's now retiree and looking forward to it and enjoying it. They plan to spend 6 months up in New Hampshire at Alton Bay, and then 6 months in Tennessee at a house they bought with their youngest son. And they'll spend the winters there and the summers in New Hampshire.
When you first moved to the area, you didn't live on campus, I recall.
No, we lived over in Butterfield Acres for 5 years. Then my husband had a ruptured appendix and didn't recover from it. So after he died, that was too much for me to care for over there. I had a large double-wide mobile home and a big yard. I didn't want to stay over there by myself. So we moved over. I got a good chance to move into Park of the Pines in a motorhome, mobile home. And I've loved it ever since I got there because everything is right here that you need. And I love it there.
You told me that recently you celebrated a birthday?
89. Doesn't seem possible.
It doesn't, and you do great. I'm just really...
Thank you.
But you did something on your birthday that you didn't want to do, right?
No, this was at Christmas.
Oh, at Christmas. What happened?
I was up in North Carolina to my daughter's house for Christmas, and her whole family was there, and their one and only grandchild, which they waited a long time for. We had a good time there for a week before Christmas, but on Christmas Day, I got up to go to the table for dinner. My nose was running, and I thought, well, I got to get a Kleenex. So I turned quickly, too quickly, and I didn't turn my foot at the same time, and down I went, broke my hip. So I stayed up there for another 2 months, recuperating after my surgery, and lost 20 pounds while I was there. And Cindy gave me good meals. She gave me smaller portions because I don't have a big appetite. And I was glad to lose the pounds.
A hard way to lose them, but it looks like you've made a wonderful recovery.
Thank you. I'm doing very well, I think, for my age.
And you're back to driving to town to do your shopping?
Yes, not much to my daughter's chagrin.
Well, I think some things are payback. What do you think?
I think so, yeah. Could be.
You have been going back to Alton Bay at least
once every summer.
Tell us about your cottage.
We used to spend our whole summers up there, but I don't anymore. I go for a couple of weeks. But this year I went for the whole month of July. Had a good time. It's not the same. It changes, you know. But Cindy wants me to live with her and John, but I don't really want to. I'm an very independent woman. And so I've decided I'm going to stay here as long as I can. I got everything I need right here. I don't really need to go anywhere. If I do, I can. There are so many people to help you with whatever you need, and I love it.
Would you share a little bit with our viewers that may not know about Alton Bay? How old is the campground there?
Pardon?
How old is the campground? When was it established?
Campground is over 150 years old. Abraham Lincoln's wife used to come to the meetings at Alton Bay, New Hampshire.
Oh my goodness, now that story I've never heard.
Yeah. That's when they first started. They came by train. That was the main way to get to Alton Bay, actually, because the road didn't go by the lake at that time. It was the train tracks that went through. And people came in horse and buggies. And the whole campground was just cottages. You know, some were this close together. I don't know how they ever built the walls. But it was a very old campground, and it's been through a lot of turmoil over the years. A lot of fires happen there, and these old buildings, cottages, some of them are over 100 years old.
That are still there. They
first started with tents because they didn't know. We figured the Lord was coming soon, and so they started out with just tents on the grounds, but eventually they had the platform base from where their tents were sitting. They built walls, and that's how a lot of the cottages came up. But it's a nice place to be.
I've talked to, with our Front Porch Conversation, several people who either have a campground experience like that at Alton Bay or other campgrounds. And being a Southerner, it's amazing to think that your camp would have been in the same place that long.
Well, this place has been here
I know.
a long time, too.
Some denominations, their campgrounds are 40 years old or 50 years old, not 100 plus,
right,
you know.
Right, yeah. That has lasted a long time.
And I know it's brought about a lot of long-term friendships for people as well.
Yes, yes. I think everybody, or most of the people from the Somerville Advent Christian Church in Massachusetts, that went to Alton Bay. Most of those families are still going up there, whoever's left. But so it's lasted a long time.
Audrey, I know you told me you enjoy reading.
Yes.
And one of your other favorite things is to go have breakfast at the Loaf and Gopher.
Yes, I enjoyed that. I went there this morning.
Good.
I see the same people most mornings. Sometimes we'll get some new people in and get to know some more people. It's an easy place to get acquainted.
And you're also a member of the church here at the
Yes,
village.
I am. Yes. We've been members ever since we moved here. Even when we lived in Butterfield Acres, we were members.
And some of our viewers may not know, but Butterfield Acres is just off the campus.
Just off the grounds,
And we have
right.
a number of people who are members that live
Yes.
there as well.
Yes. It's a pretty place to live, nice place to live too, but I enjoy being on the grounds because everything is within, a couple of minutes riding in the golf cart.
And I see you zipping around, so.
Yes.
And now it's time for us to zip this conversation up. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in.